Chapter 9. Jane may be more useful to us than I first thought. Hello, Plan B. Also, I liked your short hair better. Just saying. In chemistry class, Evie sat next to Doug and stared longingly at Chad. Across the lab bench, beyond the tubing, clamps, pipettes, and steaming beakers, Chad was bathed in his own golden light. Evie couldn't stop gazing at him. Chad tried to see what his lab partner was writing so he could copy the notes down. The chemistry teacher, Mr. DeLay, scribbled a formula on the chalkboard. Any chance he's in line for a throne? Evie asked Doug. Anywhere in line? Chad, Prince Charming Jr., Cinderella's son, said Doug. Evie turned and looked at Doug, then back at Chad. Chad inherited the charm, but not a lot of there, said Doug. Know what I mean? Evie rested her head on her hand. Looks like they're there to me, she said. Evie, said Mr. DeLay, perhaps this is just review for you, so tell me, what is the average atomic weight of silver? Evie stared at him blankly. Atomic weight? She said. Well, not very much. I mean, it's an atom, right? She smiled and let out a laugh. Chad laughed too. Mr. DeLay beckoned her forth. Evie pocketed her mirror and strolled confidently up to the chalkboard. Let's see. She took the chalk from the teacher, stealthily removing her mirror and speaking down into it. How do I find the average atomic weight of silver? She glanced at her mirror, hidden at her side, and it revealed the whole long calculation of the answer, which she copied onto the chalkboard. That would be 106.905 times 0.5200 plus 108.9.05 times 0.4800, which, Mr. DeLay, would give us 107.9 amu. She smiled. Chad, impressed, copied her calculation into his lab notebook. Doug looked at Evie curiously. Amu? He mouthed to himself. It was a mistake to underestimate, said Mr. DeLay. Evie spun around in a circle, whipping the teacher with her long, blue-black locks. A villain? She said, smiling. Don't make it again. She threw him the chalk and flounced back toward her seat. As she passed Chad, he slipped her a note and ogled her. When Evie sat down, she opened the note. It read, Meet me under the bleachers at 3. She looked up at Chad and nodded at him. He rested his head on his hand, and Evie did the same. They locked eyes and shared a dreamy, longing look. Doug rested his head on his hand, too, and frowned. On the grassy tourney field, Ben stood with a stopwatch facing Carlos. Okay, Carlos, said Ben, we're going to do some sprints. Ready? Carlos, who was kneeling a good distance away, nodded at him. A little dog came out of nowhere, barking, and began to chase Carlos, who took off. Carlos sped toward Ben, then past him, screaming in terror. Ah! Ben clicked his watch. Sweet! Then he realized Carlos was being chased. Carlos kept running. He ran into the woods, the dog hot on his heels. He hopped part way up a tree, and the dog stood at its base, watching him. No! Stop! He shouted, terrified. The scruffy, rust-colored dog looked up at him with wide, imploring eyes. Carlos! Ben called. Ben! 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 Help me! Carlos shouted as Ben appeared. This thing is a killer. He's going to chase me down and rip out my throat. This is a vicious rabbit pack animal. Hey, who told you that? Asked Ben, lifting the little dog. My mother, said Carlos. Corella? Asked Ben. She's a dog expert, a dog yeller, said Carlos. Ben's face broke into a smile. Why are you holding him? He's going to attack you, said Carlos. Carlos, you've never actually met a dog, have you? said Ben. Of course not, said Carlos. Dude, meet Carlos. Carlos, this is Dude. He's the campus mutt, said Ben. He doesn't look like a rabbit-packed animal, said Carlos, stepping down from the tree. Geez, it's kind of like looking into a mirror, Carlos spoke to Dude. I bet you're used to being kicked around, right? Carlos scratched Dude's head and smiled. Ben smiled too, and passed Dude over to Carlos. You're a good boy, said Carlos, laughing and rubbing Dude's belly. Ben's smile faded. I guess you guys have it pretty rough on the island, he said. Yeah, said Carlos. Let's just say we don't get a lot of belly rubs. Ben unconsciously